All right, welcome to Old School. God, my favorite show on the planet. All right, Cenk, Uygur, Brett Erlich. Look at this, Gary Gulman.
Hi, everyone.
Woo!
Thanks for having me. I should have shaved.
Yeah, no.
You don't have to shave.
Yeah. I mean, look at Brett. He's a mess.
I am.
I wouldn't have worn such a fancy shirt if I knew you guys were gonna.
No, I know we dressed down for this show. It's
dress
funny.
like you're at hockey practice.
I can change.
No, you look good, brother.
Thank you.
look
I
good.
appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. I feel good. I feel terrific.
Good. Well, actually, that's kind of the point of your HBO
Yes.
special.
Yes.
So it's called The Great Depression. So I want to show you a piece of it real quick, and then I want to talk about how you're a comic and your last name means to laugh in Turkish.
Yes.
Okay, and then get into your depression and whether you cured it or not. Okay, hold.
Right, okay.
Hold.
All right.
So let's watch a little piece of the special.
I grew up at a time the definition of manhood was so narrow. You were either Clint Eastwood or you were Richard Simmons. There was nothing in between. There were no Paul Rudds, no kind-eyed Mark Ruffalo's. You had to be so hard. And millennials, they're so accepting of each other and they feel safe coming out to each other in high school, even junior high. I have to be honest with you, in 1987, I didn't feel safe ordering a Sprite. This will sound nuts, but Sprite, amongst the men of my community, was considered a woman's beverage.
Gary, that is so true.
So good.
Okay,
really
first of all,
true.
I'm 49. Are you 50?
No.
Okay.
You sound like
49.
No, I'll tell you why, because I graduated in 88 from high school and you said 87, so I assumed you were graduating then.
No.
No, so you're
you
younger
just
than me.
jumped to all kinds of
Okay.
conclusions. I graduated in '89.
Oh, in 89,
Yeah,
okay, all right.
yeah.
So good, like everyone else, you're younger than me. So, but for me, it wasn't Sprite as much as it was Zima. Like if you,
my
word.
You guys remember Zima?
Yeah, the Zima
yes.
guy, like
Yes.
Yeah. Oh my
Yes.
God! If you order
Yeah.
Zima, everybody
It
was
was
sure
a
that you were part of the
woman's
LGBT
beverage.
community.
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
And,
And
it meant nothing.
Of course, it meant nothing.
How do you gender soft drinks? It was infuriating.
And it was so
Yes.
delicious.
Yes.
I remember in college, I thought it was gone, and it just showed up like magically, as if the Zima guy reanimated and dropped it on our front porch. And I opened it and I was like, what heavenly beverage is this?
Yeah. No, look, I didn't like the taste of beer, and I started drinking when I was 22. So I'm weird in a lot of different ways. Okay.
Yeah, I don't care for the taste of beer. I prefer malt liquor in that world.
Yeah, well, that's probably not true either.
Yeah.
But like, so I believe it's true that you prefer it.
Yeah.
And I like malt liquor, and I grew to enjoy. But you know, part of the reason I drank malt liquor was not because it tasted better, but because we were in Philly when I was in college. I went to school in Philly, right?
Yes.
And it felt tougher. It felt straighter.
Oh, see, I was able to buy a 40-ounce for $3 in Massachusetts.
Yes, that's true too.
And then I didn't have to drink anymore after that.
Yeah.
It was so powerful.
No, but it's true. First of all, it was 40 ounces.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And second of all,
Yes.
it was stronger. And you're right, in Philly,
Yes.
it was like, I think we got them for $2.
Wow.
So for that's like even better than weed. Right? Dude, that's a lot of intoxication for $2.
And malt liquor had every 80s rap group advertising for them. Every Old English and St. Ides, and yeah, their songs were all about 40s.
right, that's right, yeah.
It was really helpful.
Oh, there was one that was just like, I was fine with everything. I didn't like the taste of any of them. That's why I would drink Zima. But the one that was the one with the B, what was that one? Mickey's.
Mickey's, yeah.
Oh, Mickey's is awful. Jesus Christ, I couldn't get through the 40 ounces. I was like, man, who vomited in this thing?
Well, this is for me. Mickey's was. It was Mickey's Big Mouth, and my dad's name is Mickey. And when I first, this is gonna get really dark, but like when I first started to drink, my dad had just died.
Oh gosh.
Oh, this took a turn.
So, but I was like, you know what? I should have a Mickey's. Like I should have a Mickey's. That's
such a
my
weird
dad's
thing.
name. And I remember a quote from my dad. He was like, "Listen, when I first got to college, he played college football too.
No way, where
He's
at?
UCLA.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot
won
that.
the
Your
Rose
dad was
Bowl.
your dad was a man.
My
he
dad-
wouldn't drink Sprite.
He was a man. No, I have tons of. That's why I was like, thought it was so great because you're talking about all these things. These are all things my dad said, but it was never like pressure. But like when I read back the transcript of my childhood, I'm like, that was pressuring me to just be a straight dude. But I remember,
Yes, they had no idea.
Yeah, no, I was just So I remember opening and it was Mickey's Big Mouth. So the hole at the top was like, no, you're drinking this fast.
Yes.
We're going to put as much on your palate as we can, as quickly as we can.
Wow.
And I remember like, this is me getting back in touch with my dad, and just taste me so bad.
It's really bad.
Where
No,
I'm
I'm not.
just-
Look, I'm sorry, Mickey's. I hate to do this to you. If you're still around, but you're terrible.
But the bee was awesome. It looked cool, and I just remember like it was like this very sad failure of a moment, being like, I guess, do I not like my dad?
I was positive. Speaking of rap, Gary, to your point, I was positive that House of Pain drank Mickey's.
Really?
I don't know why, but I just assumed House of Pain drinks Mickey's.
That's interesting. Although I always thought they were St. Ides.
You thought so?
yeah,
Oh, that's
yeah.
interesting. Yeah, we'll have to have him on the show. Figure it out. Okay, so speaking of taking a dark turn,
Right.
your comedy special is about presumably the least comedic thing, which is depression.
Right. But very common amongst comedians, or at least very common for comedians to be open about it and talk about it. So that's very healthy. But the thing is that a lot of the lifestyle surrounding stand-up comedy is not that healthy. There's a lot of drinking and carousing and staying up late. But
Lots of Zimas.
yeah, a lot of
Zima-rich environment.
Zima-rich. Yes, and yeah, we were drinking a lot of our pay.
Yeah.
So that was an issue, but I had this idea about 1.5 years ago about doing a documentary about my recovery from my depression, mixed with all the jokes that came from my hospitalization and my treatment, and also my lifelong battle with depression. I can remember having thoughts that now would be diagnosed as clearly depressive at age 7, as early as that. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Well, out of curiosity, what was it? Do you remember at age 7 what you thought?
Well, I didn't want to live anymore at age 7.
Wow.
Yeah, I didn't know how I would go about it, and I also always believed that I would wind up in a psych ward. I don't know why.
Wow.
Because I knew that I was very sensitive for a boy, and I took things very hard, and I was sad and. Yeah, the only thing that raised my spirits, right? The only thing that raised my spirits was comedy and watching stand-up comedians, and for me
cool.
it was David Brenner and then Gary Shandling.
Yeah.
And I remember one time my dad took me to see Jay Leno when I was 16, and that was really something. My mom took me to see Johnny Carson for my bar mitzvah.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and Gary Shandling was the comedian. Princess Leia was the guest. Carrie Fisher, and I was a huge Star Wars fan, but I was a bigger stand-up fan, and I was blown away that I got to see Gary Shandling. He was incredible.
Yeah, it's
and very honest about his struggles with his mental health and his moods.
Yeah, so that opens up a can of worms. There's like a million things to discuss there.
Right.
But first, I'd like to brag about how Gary Shandling retweeted me before he died.
Really?
Yeah, and so,
wow.
But to give you a sense of how much I respect him, I immediately called Ben Mankiewicz, who is the normal co-host on Old School and started the company with me. And I was like, Gary Shandling retweeted me. I made it.
That's amazing.
Right.
That's amazing. But a retweet is a huge commitment.
Right. Yes. Right. It wasn't
like-
just a like.
Yeah, a like is fine. My friend Brian Koppelman, that he produces Billions, he created Billions. He says that a like is you don't want to be seen with this person in public. And a retweet is you're okay with people seeing you with this person.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. That's funny because one of Ben's best friends growing up is Dollar Bill in Billions.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
Kelly just texted us. Kelly Coins his name. He's an excellent actor. Just texting a little while ago. Yeah.
Oh.
So anyway, that's fun stuff. But back to depression, everybody. Okay. So I've said this 100 times before I even saw anything that you'd done, Gary, and knew your story. I'm like, and I've talked about it on the show, what's with comics? Why are they so dark? Why are they like, to a man, every comic I know is like, no matter how successful they are, bitter, like.
Oh, that's interesting. I don't know about bitter.
Like pessimistic, skeptical, like a lot of bad characteristics.
Right,
Like for like, because common lore is like, oh, the jester, like, in a good mood, happy-go-lucky.
Right.
No, super dark.
Yeah, we could analyze this for days, but I do know one thing, that cynicism and skepticism plays really well with audiences. So you're gonna see
that's a good point. Great point.
A lot of comedians approach that. The other thing is that more than any other group, comedians are not embarrassed to talk about moodiness or being mentally ill. I remember when I first started taking medication, I was so secretive about, I had a girlfriend, she never knew I was on medication. I didn't tell anybody. I hid the pills and I would travel with them and disguise them. And I told no one, and the first person I ever heard talk about taking antidepressants was a comedian. And I remember thinking, what is this person doing? She's admitting to this embarrassing thing and this shame. And so I really admire the comedy community. I never could have been the first comedian to talk about depression. I'm too private.
But there's like a lot of comedians that the first thing they do is talk about something that they're embarrassed about. Like the first thing. Like I know Gaffigan was on the show a couple of days ago, and he was just like the beginning of his comedy special is, I'm Jim Gaffigan and this is what I look like. Like it is just like, here I am. I'm all out on the table, and it must be, it's strange because it's just, you're supposed to talk about those things. Right. And as someone who goes to comedy shows, when someone just goes like, I thought about that, I would never say that out loud.
No, I know.
It's just weird. Why?
But it's very healthy. I have a really good therapist in New York, and he told me a long time ago, and I didn't take him up on it for a while, but that if everybody knows everything about you, then they have nothing on you. So they can't embarrass you and they can't expose you, and so it's a much less stressful way to go through life, being an open book.
Yeah, well, that's the Eminem strategy.
Yes, from 8 Mile. Yes,
that's right.
Yes. He takes away all your weapons.
Yes. Speaking of guys who definitely drink Mickeys.
Okay. But Eminem also says that you only get one shot, and then even within that movie, he gets 2 shots.
Lots of shots.
Yeah, he gets a number of shots.
Eminem, notorious liar. So, and I don't believe that he killed his ex-wife. I don't believe it at all. I don't think she's in the trunk. Okay. Anyway.
I never finished 8 Mile. I just know that many references until the trunk.
Yeah. And it's been a while since we watched it, so nice work.
Yeah.
So anyway, but it's true. Like Howard Stern, I remember growing up, he kept talking about how small his penis was, and I was like, "That wow, like that takes some balls." Ironically, right?
But I've always been drawn to comedians in that vein who are arrogant with really nothing to be that confident about. Howard, goofy-looking guy, and he hated himself and how he looked, and yet he was so confident and would talk to famous people in such a familiar way.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you ever watched a show called Get a Life with Chris Elliott.
Yeah. My cousin.
Yeah, I remember it. Yeah.
He was a 30-year-old.
He's your cousin?
My cousin was a set designer on the show.
Okay.
So he said you should start watching this show, and I was like, he's like, yeah, we had to make yogurt come out of an alien's elbows, and I was like, what? And I watched it, like that was hilarious.
It was
Chris Elliott.
It was the funniest show. It was so far ahead of its time. But Chris Elliott was this 30-year-old paperboy who was arrogant. He dated beautiful women. He had sex.
That's really funny.
He had this incredible life, but he lived above his parents' garage, delivered papers in the morning, and thought he was the God's gift to humanity.
That's one of those
so
shows
funny.
that everyone was like, either people loved it or they watched it and they were like,
right. Yes,
this show.
It was ahead of its time.
I remember that one episode where I was like, I like this, and I don't think anyone else does. Was one where there was
a cult hit.
It was an alien showed up and squirted.
Well, the alien wasn't a cute, lovable alien. It was a scourge, and it was violent, and it would puke over everything.
And the puke, if you ate it, would give you powers.
Yes.
Oh, that makes sense.
And he won spelling bee.
Also, you could.
did the
That was a separate episode.
Was that a separate episode?
A separate episode in which Chris was exposed to toxic waste and became the smartest person on the planet by far. And his choice was, instead of solving world hunger or taking over the world, he decided to win spelling bees.
Oh, good choice.
And he went around the world winning spelling bees. And I remember him complaining about all the bee groupies. All the women were throwing themselves at him because he was winning spelling bees. Yes.
And I'm pretty sure he ran out of toxic waste early in the episode. They're like, for no reason, he was like, I always thought there was a silent K at the beginning of the word pants.
Yes.
And he runs out of toxic waste, and to win the spelling bee, the word is pants.
Yeah.
And he loses.
It was very easy and he lost because he couldn't spell pants. But also it was like flowers for Algernon a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
so good, I love
that. I knew that we would be talking about Chris Elliott. By the way, the alien also drank Miggies.
Also drank Miggies.
But so you mentioned like the unearned confidence in a sense, right?
Yes.
Well, that's me. So let me explain a couple things that happened with my wife today that fits into this conversation pretty well. First of all, quick side note: in Chinese, the word for penis is it's more of a for children you say it and stuff, but still it's xiaojiji, which is like the funnest word ever.
Yeah,
right. Like,
xiaojiji.
Oh, look at this xiaojiji.
Yeah.
Right.
Still caught up on this talking about kids' penises thing. But
Well, yes. Well, when you have young kids, right?
God.
Anyways, so my wife had just read this thing about how if what the different perceptions women and men have when their spouse cheats on them.
Oh boy.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so the woman thinks, oh, I must have been inadequate emotionally for him, etc. Right? The guy thinks, oh, God damn it, my penis isn't big enough. Like, seriously, like on average, they think that it's their xiao GG. Okay. That men think like, oh God, man, if I had a better penis, this would have never happened. Which I'm like both stunned by and so amused by. Like, why?
Yeah.
What a weird thing to conclude. Not like, hey, I was emotionally distant, or I was, I didn't take out the garbage, or I watched too much baseball. But like, obviously, it's my penis.
That's so absurd.
Right?
and the reason she cheated on you is because you think everything's about your penis.
Yeah,
Like,
that's probably
that
a
kind of
far
thought.
more likely answer. That's
That is
right.
the irony, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so then
it was about his penis.
It was about his penis,
His
but
obsession with it. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what made me realize, like, wow, like I had no idea how obsessed guys are generally about their penises. Like, oh, is it big enough? Is it the right size? Is it, how about the girth and what's going on?
Yeah.
Oh,
Like they're
man.
spending so much mental energy on that. And so that brings me back to me being Chris Elliott. Because it's not like I'm God's gift or anything, but I feel like I got this on lock.
Jesus Christ.
So I realized in that moment, hey, even though, I'm whatever, right?
Yeah.
That I was mentally healthy enough to never fret it. Like to never be like, oh my God, is it, is the right angle? Is it, where's the lean going?
Right, but it also isn't it an indicator that women are the superior gender? That this is what they're thinking rather
by
than
far.
Yeah.
Oh, could you imagine? Could you imagine a guy cheats on the woman and the woman thinks, was it my butt?
Keep it clean, Cenk.
I mean, that's inconceivable. No one would ever think that. So that goes to show you what is wrong with men. We are obsessed with genitalia.
Because we're boys.
We gotta get that.
It's in the nose. It's in my nose. It's really bad. No guy's actually been like, it's her vagina, it's a problem.
I've never met a single guy who's ever said that.
No one's done that. No one has ever done that.
Yeah. Well, I had to cheat on my wife. Why? You don't want to know.
You don't want to know. I can't even.
Okay, so now this is a funny question you probably get. Now back to semi-serious topics. So are you out of it? Do you ever get out of depression? How does that work?
I look at it the same way as I think addicts and alcoholics look at it. I'm in recovery.
Oh yeah,
I'm in remission, and it's lasted for over a year and a half. But there's part of me that sees madness in my periphery at all times, and I just have to remain vigilant about doing all the things that I did to get better, from taking my medicine and exercising and eating right and not sleeping too much, but getting enough sleep and being careful, because I travel so much, about keeping a routine while I'm on the road, which is really difficult. But I find if there's a decent gym in the hotel, I will exercise at least once on the road for 30 to 45 minutes. So but that's the hardest.
There's a part in your
thing is the travel.
The special's so awesome because it does go back and forth between like you doing stand up and then you're in the therapist office. You're sitting with another comedian talking about it. And one of the subjects, I don't want to spoil anything, but the subject comes up is like, what if you're a comedian, you kind of feel like maybe part of what's wrong with me is what makes me funny, and I kind of have to preserve what's wrong with me. I can't fix it, or I will fix myself out of being funny.
Right.
Like, how do you handle that?
Yeah, it's a myth, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I wrote nothing for 2 years while I was sick. 2.5 years. I wrote 5 minutes of jokes, and then since I came out of it, I've written 2.5 hours of material. So I wrote the special, and then another hour to tour on after the special airs. So there's a big difference in how I write, whether I'm healthy or not. Now, a lot of the source material came from me being sick, but I couldn't write from within it. I had to get outside the storm to get it all down, and because there's part of depression is it's a cognitive issue. You don't think straight, and they call it faux dementia. You forget things. You have a hard time solving problems and figuring out things, and I read 0 books for 2.5 years because I couldn't concentrate, and I would lose my place. I couldn't remember the different characters' names, and since I've been better, I've read 122 books in less than 2 years. So
that's literally unbelievable. I've read 122 books, never.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think I've.
Like, no, I don't think, I'm serious.
I see books all over these.
There's nothing in them.
Yeah, and
you're not reading them.
There's just the cover.
Page after page of blank. There's nothing at all in them. It's just props.
One has like a secret codex in it. If you open it, it's like cut out the pages. Yeah.
There's a rock hammer in one of them.
There's a small rock.
To dig your way out of Shawshank.
Yeah, if you'd asked me to guess the most amazing fact that would come out of this show, I would not have predicted that you read 122 books in 2 years.
Yeah.
So, help me understand. When you're better, is it that you've got kind of a clear lane and bad thoughts try to kind of enter and you notice them and you're like, no, go away? Like, I'm making this up, but is that based on what you said? Is that?
Pretty much. I mean, I have the attitude where I get stressed about something and I say I'll figure it out, but if I'm depressed, I get stressed about something and my mind is telling me, well, you're a failure and you're a loser and you'll never get out of it. And you also, it takes away so much energy. Just the simplest things like walking my dog. I remember my wife, we would walk around the block and I would continually tell her, please slow down. And I'm a foot taller than her, basically, like 10 inches taller than her, and I couldn't keep up with her. Yeah, I couldn't keep up with her, and she looked like my caregiver because I was hobbling around, and now it's the opposite. I have to slow down for her, so it's not just the sadness and the not enjoying anything. There are cognitive issues as well as energy issues that just make it so difficult.
So I'm endlessly fascinated by this. So a little bit more, if you'll indulge me.
No, I will indulge you. Yeah.
So, how chemical is it? Like, what percentage of it is chemical, and hence, like, what percentage of it is the medicine, as opposed to like a clear way of thinking about it? Your therapist helping you, acknowledging, hey, wait a minute, remember that thing where it says you're a failure, you're a loser? That's actually part of this, so I don't have to acknowledge it and can kick it out of the lane. Right, yeah. Like, so how does it break down? Do you have a sense of
chemistry? I would say that the medicine gets me to a point where jogging for a half hour isn't an impossibility, and I can get out of bed and put on my sneakers, and it's not a huge chore. And walking around the block isn't exhausting. So it gets me to that point, and then everything else from eating right and exercising to reading and staying outside of my apartment as much as possible, because there's isolating is such a problem with people who are depressed and spending time alone, and that was really important, was to get back out there amongst the living and stop just ruminating in my mind by myself. If you're talking to people, you're at least distracted from yourself, and it's really helpful.
Yeah, wow, that is so interesting. Like, man, I'm so lucky because look, there's also, I'm sure, shades of it, right? And I'm sure that it's a spectrum.
It's definitely a spectrum, and most people respond to therapy and they don't need medicine. And then after that, most people respond to medicine and they don't need anything else besides medicine and therapy. And then there are people like me who wind up in the hospital for a few weeks, and yeah, but that worked.
So what happened in the hospital that worked?
Well, the treatment I don't want to go into because it's unusual and it's sort of a surprise in the show, but the hospital was an issue because I should have been there earlier because I was really sick. I was pretty much catatonic, like Silas Marner, and I didn't want to go in because I had seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest as a kid, and later Girl Interrupted as a teenager, and I thought these places,
not the things to see.
Yeah.
These places are really frightening.
Movies aren't like, these places are great.
Yes, and in reality, they're very ordinary, like any hospital ward, except for you wear socks that have treads on the bottom. Right. You wear
Just
pajamas.
what they give to first class passengers, by the way.
Yes, you get everything but the hot towel.
Yeah.
Which I gotta tell you something about the hot towel in first class. It is taunting the people in coach to give everybody a hot towel. Whenever they offer me the hot towel, I say no, because the next step is the guillotine. They will revolt because the rich people are showing off too much.
We were fine with the crappy headphones.
Yes, yes, and you getting the peanuts ahead of us and a kind bar.
And like, what is it called? Glass?
Now you're mopping your brow with this thing you wouldn't even use in your own home.
So yeah, it's funny. The first time I flew first class was when I was at MSNBC. Okay, and so what shocked me was not the hot towels.
Okay.
And it was not the peanuts. It was that they had warmed up the nuts.
Yes.
And I'm like, I had never even thought to do that. Like, I didn't know that was a thing rich people did. Like, gratuitously warming their nuts.
Yes.
Right? Like, these are cold nuts. Please.
Yeah.
Chip, run along.
Right, but you assume,
and warmed them up.
You assume now that this is how the wealthy have been living, but it's only in the first class section of and there are no hot towels.
Right, it's like you would intuitively think like the rich people have like better, softer beds and more comfortable seats, but like that's how the super rich are. They just confuse you.
Yeah, and then I was constantly like, are they better?
Is it? No,
like,
it's not.
I kept eating the warm nuts. Like, is it better than cold nuts?
No,
I can't tell. It must be though. If rich people like it this way.
Right. Yeah.
It's the only thing they have in first class is heating things.
Yeah. Okay. So, and the pajamas you were saying. So the
Pajamas, and then when you go to call your wife on the phone at the end of the day, the cord on the payphone is too short to kill anybody with.
Oh, that's really funny.
And I remember thinking, have they always been this short? Oh no, that's right. I'm crazy. This is why.
That's so funny.
But they should like fix. There shouldn't be constant reminders around you. Like, believe me, I remember. I was feeling a little normal until.
And my friend,
sweetheart,
my friend brought cupcakes for Valentine's Day, and they confiscated the twine that was around the box.
I get it.
Oh wow. Yeah. So right now somewhere. Jeffrey Epstein's guard is watching. Go, short. God, why didn't I think of that? Anyway, so I think last thing about it, because I'm continue to be curious. Like, so once you got to the point where you could do the half hour of jogging, et cetera, and the medicine got you there, et cetera.
Right,
what was the single most helpful thing to get you out of it and to get you to feel better, et cetera? Whether it was something your therapist said or a realization you came to?
There was I was reading this article about David Foster Wallace's notebooks, and I was a fan of David Foster Wallace. He's become problematic, so I don't know how I feel now. But anyhow, there was this quote by Beckett in his notebook, and it said, "Ever tried, ever failed, no matter. Try again, fail better." And that relieved me of all the pressure to write good jokes. I just knew.
That's super interesting. I'm so glad I asked.
After that I didn't have to be perfect, and I was going to fail, and I gave myself permission to fail. So this thing where every show became a test and a referendum on my value as a human and an artist became, no, you're going to fail, and you'll try again tomorrow, and you'll fail a little bit better. And it was such a relief.
I have been incredibly similar story, even though I was not in the same place you are.
Okay.
But look, different portions of this show go to different places. So some of you are leaving, God bless your hearts. Everybody always gets the whole show if you go to tyt.com/join and become a member. Good night, good luck.